All right, off we go. And thank you all again for being here. Tonight, we are covering lesson 3, the Kinsman Redeemer, from chapter 3. And so let's talk about where we're going to be going and what we're going to be studying. First of all, we're going to tackle a review. Then we're going to look at your favorite passages. Then we're going to talk about Operation Threshing Floor, which is, doesn't that sound awesome? And then walk the fine line, know yourself and others. And then we'll talk about the homework and our own big takeaways each one of us have. So let's begin with a quick bit of review. Those days when the judges ruled is how the book of Ruth starts off. And it talks about a man from Bethlehem in Judah went to live for a while in the country of Moab. So immediately we know the time is in the days when the judges ruled, and the place is in the country of Moab. First, the question is, the time of the judges was a time, A, there was no king in Israel, everyone did as they pleased. B, after both Moses and Joshua died. C, a time that lasted about 325 years. D, one that ended with Samuel, the final judge and prophet. Or E, all of the above. Do you guys know what the correct answer, the most correct answer is?
E.
That is right. It is E, which is all of the above. It is true. All of these things. Joshua leads the people into the promised land in about 40 years after the Exodus. And then that time of the judges happens whenever Joshua dies. Moses has already passed. It lasts for approximately 325 years. And then Samuel anoints both King Saul and King David. They rule about these dates that you see. And then the end of the the end of the Old Testament happens around 430 BC with the book of Malachi. And then the place is in the country of Moab. And you can see here on the map, this is modern day Israel. You can see Jerusalem and in Bethlehem, where we know many of the things are going on in the future, as well as some of the roots of the story are right here in Bethlehem. And Ruth the Moabitess, and her mother-in-law Naomi, her sister-in-law Orpah, not Oprah, but Orpah, was from here in Moab, and they travel back to Bethlehem. And this is modern-day Israel, modern-day Jordan that we're talking about. And so now we know where it happened and when it happened. So question number 2. The book of Ruth was a story of a mother whose daughters died. She adopted a teen girl named Ruth as her own daughter. Or B, a story of a mother whose sons died and whose daughter-in-law Ruth was unwilling to leave her side. Or C, a story of Naomi, a woman who never really faced tough times in her life and gave birth to a daughter named Ruth. What is the correct answer here? That is correct. It is B. The story of a mother whose 2 sons and her husband, by the way, died. Daughter-in-law Ruth was unwilling to leave her side. This is where we get this very famous passage, probably the most famous passage in the book of Ruth. Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. And so that's a great line and a great story there as we see the beginning of the story of Ruth. All right, let's see here. Question number 3. The term levirate marriage refers to A, a marriage between a woman from the community and a Levite or a priest. B, a marriage between a Jewish woman and a guy named Levi. Or C, marriage between a widow and a brother-in-law for the reason of sustaining the family name and the family line. Do you guys know?
C.
Were y'all paying attention? I accidentally jumped a little early and gave you the some of y'all are acting like, yeah, I knew exactly what it was. Some of you, all right, that's fine. That's fine. All right, no problem. Well, off we go today as we talk about your favorite passages from chapter 3. So hopefully you did a little bit of reading. You guys have been phenomenal about doing the reading and coming prepared. And as you know, and as you have experienced, we have a better time and a better experience here whenever you guys all participate. And the more of you that participate and the more participation we have from you guys, the better it is. So please feel free, jump in, share your favorite passage. And so I ask the question each time. It's time to turn in your homework. What was your favorite passage? What does it say? You can read it. And why does it speak to you, or what does it say to you? So somebody jump in. You can be the first this evening to tell me what is your favorite passage from Ruth chapter 3.
I could read
What's that?
the verse. But it's very difficult to understand, but I can read the verse.
Okay, go ahead and read it.
Okay, then said she, "Sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day." When Naomi was redeemed.
So your favorite passage is kind of right there at the very end of the chapter, the one where Naomi speaks and says, this man is going to move on what he's decided to do, and he's going to do it. I don't even think the day is going to go out before he's already made a move on his decision. And that is a really great passage of scripture. Why do you like that passage, Miss Isabel?
Because it was really difficult to understand the whole chapter.
Yeah.
But toward the end, it kind of spoke to me.
Okay. So it was a little bit hard for you to understand chapter 3, but maybe at the end, it kind of made some sense.
Yes.
Honestly, I kind of came in thinking this was going to be a difficult passage to convey and to go deep on, but I actually found a lot, and I hope that by the end of our study tonight, it'll make a lot more sense and you'll get a lot more out of it. I think that you will. So my fingers are crossed, and I've been praying about it, and I think we'll all learn some things together. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Do you guys have a favorite passage, something that you read that you had jump out to you? What does it say, and why is it one of your favorites?
Yes, so I resonate with what Miss Isabel said too, and chapter 3 was kind of confusing at first, because I was like, why is she putting herself out there for the man to see her first, you know?
Yeah.
But when it came to chapter 18, like she said, the first thing that came to my mind was, if you remember in the book of Esther, King Ahasuerus, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, when he could not sleep because Mordecai had to be blessed, I felt the same interpretation from verse 18, that when Naomi told Ruth that just rest and let's see what's going to happen, because I know this man is not going to rest until he does what he's supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, Monica, or as I like to call you, Miss Samsung, I will tell you that you need to know, and all of the other women on the call need to know, and all of the men will back me up. What y'all think we know, we do not know. You think we've got things going on in our heads. We really don't. We're not super smart when it comes to dealing with women. That's just not really our thing. And so when Ruth puts herself out there, it's a really good thing for Boaz, because he was probably just not going to make any move because he was just worried about things and doing other things and distracted by other stuff. And the best thing that was about to happen to him in his life was right there at his fingertips, and he probably wasn't going to make a move because, well, we men, we have a tendency to be a little on the slow side. Can I get an amen from Eric? And Leroy bailed off on me right the minute I start talking bad about men. He could have backed me up, though. I know he could have. And Frank, don't you agree? I mean, we don't know. And worst of all, we don't know what we don't know. So ladies, anytime you're putting yourself out there, it's probably good for us because we're a little slow on the uptake.
You're giving away our secrets, Randy. We pretend to know more than we know, and you're telling everybody our secrets. So you got to stop that.
You're right. I don't know what I'm doing. I just pulled my I pulled my own man card there. I need to be careful with what I'm doing. So there you go. Monica, I do think that you'll you'll be in the same boat with Miss Isabel. I do think at the end of it, they'll make a lot more sense. Some of the things that seem a little confusing will make a lot more sense, and you'll see it in your mind's eye, I think, by the end of tonight. And this is a great part of why we get together. Like, there are going to be times where we read and we're like, I ain't gonna lie, this one really didn't speak to me, and somebody else will say what it spoke to them, and it will impact you. Or you're like, I ain't gonna lie, I didn't really get this, I didn't understand it, and then we can show some insight together, and I think it'll be something that's a blessing. So you guys hang on. I think it will make some sense, and you'll see some things in your mind's eye as we read through it. So good stuff. Appreciate it. Anybody have a favorite passage? Anyone?
I took number 11.
All right, we'll jump in there and read
think you should start
chapter
at-
3, verse
I
11.
think he should
You
start
can
at
read it.
10 because I said 10 and 11, so I think you need to start at 10.
Yeah,
I'll take
Frank,
11.
you thought you had a
Okay.
favorite.
11.
Now she just told you what your actual favorite was. Start
Yeah,
reading.
I did.
I'll take 11 and she can do 10.
There you
Well, then
go.
let me go first.
Go first.
The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. The kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger man, whether rich or poor. And now 11. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character.
All right. So let's start with you ladies first, and beauty before age. Roseanne?
Oh, well, I got all of them, huh?
Right, you got them all. Tell me why chapter 3, verse
Well,
10 was
First
what
of
you
all, I have to say, I read all the notes in my Bible.
Yeah.
So, so I understood what was going on. Because I was a little confused, but that explained what all this meant and the traditions. And so the part, first of all, that Boaz treated her well and that she was a noble character. I thought both of those things were very important. And I'm
Nice.
sure we'll get to the meaning of all of it. I won't go into all that, but it was very interesting what the notes described, what was actually happening.
And you feel free to jump in, because I'm sure you read things that are different than what I read in preparation. It's probably adding to, not contradicting. So feel free to jump in and share your 2 cents whenever that time comes. Now, Frank, go ahead. What was chapter 3, verse 11 speaking to you? Why was it your favorite?
Well, because, he said, fear not, I will do to thee all that thou request. And, it was just that she was highly respected, and her kindness was showed everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think there was just a lot of respect there. And that's why he said he would do whatever she requested.
I think you nailed one of the key things of this passage there. I don't even know how people in arranged marriages fall in love. Like, I don't get that, because I've never experienced that. But I will say that in this situation, 2 people who have seen one another in public, and that's about it, and not really had any kind of private interaction, they have a good base, because they both see in one another characteristics that they respect and that they're trying to cultivate in themselves. And so while it might not be courtship like most of us have experienced or understand, I do think that Ruth saw in Boaz and Boaz saw in Ruth respect, and their reputations were out there for everybody as well. And I think that's important stuff. And as you go forward in this, I think that it's really positive. And I don't think that I think that's part of why we're going to get to where we get to by the end of it all tonight. Just because I think it's really a powerful passage. It's built on respect and love of God and that kind of thing. So that's good. Good verse. Good stuff. All right. What else? Anything else? Anyone else want to jump in?
10 was my favorite also, but for a slightly different reason.
Okay.
Um, I just resonated when he said, this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Um, that I did find a lot of it confusing, but I don't know, when I read that, I felt like he was vulnerable. And I don't know, all this time I kind of been thinking about him as like the Redeemer. I mean, he's like the hero of this story, but then that showed me that he had insecurity as well.
Yeah.
And he probably thought, like you were saying, he didn't realize, but he also, I feel like he maybe thought there was somebody better for her, or younger or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is great. And Teresa, I love that insight. And I think it's really important for us to think about it across the board, because I think when we see a hero in the Bible, we think that they were heroic in every moment, in every facet of their character, and every facet of their personality. But Boaz here is the hero of the story, one of them, but he also is vulnerable. And he's like, I'm kind of surprised that you didn't chase after a younger man or a more wealthy man. And so what is he telling us there? You're dead on, Teresa. I'm not the wealthiest guy, and I'm sure not the youngest guy. And you've pursued me in this way. It's a great compliment. And I want to give you all that I can give you. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but great observation. And I think that is like a tool in your toolbox to go through all of the Bible to really get the deeper meanings behind the scriptures, because a lot of scriptures, it's Gideon. So he was brave. We know what he did. So he's a brave guy. Well, there's more to the story. There's Jesus. He was God's son. So he was cool with making this sacrifice. Well, there's more to the story. Think about Gethsemane. There's Peter, he denied the Lord. That's part of the story, but he was also brave, and all of those facets to people's character. Mary, let it be as to me as you have said, but she's young, she's worried, she's nervous, she's scared. She's heroic, yes, but she's human also. And that's a great tool all the way across the Bible to really help you to understand and see deeper. Good stuff. Good stuff. Anybody else want to jump in and got one more verse that really spoke to you? Anyone?
Can you hear me?
I can, Leroy, and I'm glad that you're unmuted.
I'm back.
I'm back, baby.
We have verse 18. I mean, it's a lot of good verses. 11 was great.
Why did you like 18?
But verse 18 says, then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. But the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day.
Mm-hmm.
Naomi knew that Boaz was a man of integrity and would fulfill his promise with a sense of urgency. They needed to wait on the Lord to work through Boaz.
That's so good, man. That is so good. If I could put that on a slide and preach that slide, I would do it. I love that. He was a man of integrity, and he was also a man of action. He was going to pursue the right path, and he was going to do it now. That's good stuff, man. That's really good. Really good.
Yeah, I think the main thing is to it says to wait on the Lord, sit still. I think that's a big lesson for all of us, throughout the Bible.
Good stuff. Great stuff. All right. Well, I don't want to belabor, so we'll keep moving. We do have things, and if you guys have already indicated, there might be some questions from y'all tonight about maybe understanding and going a little deeper. So if you guys will give me permission, I may say to you, we're going to get there. Give me a minute. you're not out of line for asking the question. So if you've got a question, jump in. I'll answer it, or I'll say, hey, we're going to get to it if you don't mind giving me a moment. That way we'll cover the ground. But thank you guys. And as I always have already said tonight, you guys' participation is the thing that really does help and really makes this better. All right, so let's go to Operation Threshing Floor. Dun, dun, dun. Here we go. Let me show you a picture that I found on Wikipedia when I wanted to look for a threshing floor. This is an artist rendition of what a threshing floor was. And this was by Alexei Venetsianov, which I pronounced that in perfect Russian. You probably didn't realize it, but I did. Also, this guy was clearly a prodigy. He only lived 2 or 3 years. He painted this as a 3-year-old. I'm kidding. This painting and artwork here happened somewhere around 1821 to 1823. So it gives you an idea of a threshing floor that didn't really go out of modern use. As a matter of fact, if you go to certain parts of the world where they're very much an agrarian society, and not necessarily far advanced or a lot of economic privileges, you'll still see threshing floors sometimes inside and sometimes outside. This particular one is a barn, and you have a floor here. Sometimes that floor is concrete these days, or wood that's very, very close together so that the grains of barley and wheat, when they're threshed, or separated from the stalk that is unedible, from the grain that is edible. And so that's what the threshing floor is. They take that stalk of barley or wheat and they shake out the grain, throwing away the husks and keeping the edible parts. That happens on a threshing floor. And this particular image is a perfect example in your mind's eye about where Ruth goes and sees Boaz in Operation Threshing Floor, set in motion by Naomi. You can see here is where the grain piles up. And here, you know, you have a place that protects it from the wind blowing all of the grain away. Because if you have a really windy day and you don't have a place to put it and pile it up and keep it in a spot, you can lose all of your harvest if you're not careful. And so people would come, they sometimes would have animals, sometimes they'd have implements to use, you know, to do that threshing of the grain. But this will give you an idea. And I have often said, and I want to reiterate it to you real quickly, don't forget that the ancient world was a very dark place, not just spiritually, but it was also physically dark. When the sun went down, you didn't have, hey, somebody go click on the lights. And I know that that's a silly thing to say and it goes without saying, but just stop for a second and think about a fire or a torch being the brightest light. And if you're in an area like this, you might not have a way of really seeing very well. We're going to get into that here in a minute when Boaz wakes up and he's like, hey, who's at my feet? He doesn't know because it's a, you know, crazy dark kind of place. And so you can see people would come in here after a long day's work, put in a long day's work, harvest the grain, and then eat and sleep there, making sure that no thieves would come in and get the grain and take off with it and all these different things. So this is an instructive and important image so you can see what a threshing floor kind of means. And maybe in your visual mind's eye, visualize this as kind of where Ruth pursues Boaz. Okay. Hopefully that will help. Do you guys have any questions or anything so far? I will say that this is definitely, the threshing floor is a place where most of the time men went and women were not welcome. It's not because it just wasn't considered woman's work. And if you guys, y'all know me well enough to know that this is not how I feel. I'm just simply telling you how things were, not how things should have been. But this was not woman's work. This was man's work, and they would go and work themselves day to night and bring in the harvest. And so even in this passage of scripture, you're going to hear him say, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. This was not a place for a woman because it was full of men and not a lot of protections from the men and, you know, that kind of thing. So her reputation would have been kind of soiled, if that makes sense. So, all right. I have asked Teresa Guest to do some reading for me, so you guys don't have to keep listening to my annoying voice all night, just most of it. So Teresa, if you don't mind jumping in, we're going to read the first few verses. We're going to go 1 through 6 on chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. So Teresa, go right ahead if you don't mind.
Okay. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be provided for. Now, Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do.
Naomi is the master strategist here. She knows exactly how to get Ruth and Boaz together. And so she says, I tell you what, I'm not always going to be around. And so we're getting to the place where we need to make a move, and we need to make a move towards finding you a place that forever will take care of you. So here's what we're going to do. I have put a little plan together, and I call it Operation Threshing Floor. Dun, dun, dun. And then she says, you go get on your best dress, put on all your makeup, look your best, smell your best, and then wait until Boaz has finished all his work. He sat down to watch a little Netflix and relax for a little bit. And then that's what you're going to do. That's when you're going to make your move. Okay. So some of you guys are laughing. Some of y'all aren't paying attention enough to laugh, or I'm just not funny. I'm not sure. It could be a combination of any of those things. But let's just be clear about something here. Ruth makes some really smart moves. How many of you guys have ever woken up in a cold climate and woken up in the middle of the night because you didn't have enough blanket on the bed, and it woke you up in the middle of the night? Have you all ever had that experience? I've had that experience because Shelly is a cover stealer. I love the woman. She's a sweetheart, and she's a good, saintly woman, but she is a thief in the middle of the night. She will not let me have covers, and she will be the one to reach up and say, it's not true. Randy pushes all the covers over on top of me. That's literally what she believes. I will let you decide what you think is true. Have any of y'all ever tried to push covers in the middle of the night? Just curious. Anyway, Shelly's like, yes, it is true. Okay. So whenever she uncovers his feet, I was like, what are we talking about here? Like, what is going on here? Is this like a euphemism for something? Okay, so you guys know what a euphemism is, right? It's when you say one thing, but it actually means something else. Like in just a moment, we're going to talk about sleeping together. When you say somebody's sleeping together, that does not mean that they're actually sleeping. Are you guys all with me? Okay, so that's a euphemism. Whenever I read this over and over, I literally thought, what are we talking about when she uncovers his feet? What's that all about? Is that some sort of euphemism for, Ruth kind of crossing a line here? Okay, so here is the truth. She really basically just went in there and uncovered his feet. Okay, but what happened at that time, I'm sure it's like here, especially as we know that the harvest is coming in, that probably means it's getting towards the fall. And so the winter is coming, and the temperatures are going to get cooler and cooler, especially in the dark of night. And she goes and she uncovers his feet. and he's laying down and he's tired and he's dead tired because he's worked all day. And as he sleeps into the middle of the night, but then wakes up just like you and I have and realizes, I'm cold. Why am I cold? Because my feet are uncovered. And then he notices at his feet, a woman is there. He doesn't know who it is, but we're going to talk more about that. Now, I want to be very, very clear about something here. Again, I'm not trying to call out the Nation of Islam or anything like that, but in Islamic countries, there is gender segregation to a large degree. And literally, a woman touching a man is seen as inappropriate if she's not their close relative, if they're not brother, maybe cousin, but probably not even cousin, an uncle, a father, a grandfather, a brother, and that's about it. Anything else is considered taboo. And so when Ruth goes to the threshing floor where women weren't welcome, and when she goes in and she uncovers his feet, she's doing something that's kind of borderline scandalous. Are you guys with me? Now, I want to be very clear about something. There are things that people think, and then there are actual problems or sinful things. I don't think that Ruth was doing something wrong by taking the covers and uncovering his feet. It would have been a scandal, but it was not sinful. I also think that Ruth laying at his feet on the threshing floor would have been a scandal. We're going to see more about that in a minute, but I don't think that it was actually sinful. I mean, in the scriptures, it's pretty clear that we're not supposed to be sexually promiscuous. So I think that's a sinful thing. But then you have a woman who looks like she's done something wrong, but actually has not. It might be scandalous, but it's not sinful. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Can y'all give me a thumbs up? Y'all hear where I'm coming from here? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this is important to draw the line. Ruth is walking a fine line here. She is, and man, I'm going to talk about it. Knowing yourself, knowing others, and walking a fine line. This is where we shift and kind of go into this. Ruth knew that she could control herself and walk this fine line and come away with her character still intact. And so when Naomi said, this is what you need to do to complete Operation Threshing Floor, she knew she was walking a fine line of scandalous and sinful, but she was going to stay on the right side of that line, if that makes sense. You guys with me so far? Okay. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Anyone?
Oh, Randy, in the notes that I read,
Yes.
it said that Naomi was telling Ruth to act in accordance with Israelite custom and law. It's common for a servant to lie at the feet of his master and even share a part of his covering. By observing this custom, Ruth would inform Boaz that he could be her guardian redeemer.
Yes.
But it wasn't, and then it goes on to say it was like family business, not romantic.
Yeah. I would say that Ruth was not officially a slave. She was not officially a servant girl. And I would also say that sometimes servant girls were there to provide sexually for their masters as well. And so that is why I kind of fall on this scandal versus sinful line. But I do realize, and I do agree, she was showing herself to be humble and humbly putting herself in his hands with this act. She's stepping across a line and saying, I want you to see me in a way that maybe you haven't seen me before. Not just because of the way that she's dressed or the perfume or any of that stuff. all the Operation Threshing Floor joking things aside, like she wants him to see that she is interested in his attention and his affection and his provision for her. Does that make sense? And so I think I kind of fall somewhere, not in the exact same camp, but in the same area as what you just read, if that makes sense. If anybody else wants to throw in their 2 cents, or Roseanne, if you got more to share on that front, please do, for sure. I think that brings another part to light that I didn't cover. So please keep coming with that. Go ahead.
2 cents.
What's that?
I have 2 cents. I have 2 cents. And we're not to add to scripture. And for us to think beyond uncovering his feet, we're adding something that's not there.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, I'll be better. I'll be better about it. But that was always my thought, you know, when I was a little less familiar with that. But that's good. That is good. You're right.
I don't understand what you just said.
I'm just saying, I just thought there was something else going on, or something else that was being suggested, but I was not correct.
We used to talk about sex.
Anyone else have anything else that they would like to share? Anyone?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just an act of submission, like you said, you know,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah, for sure. And she is walking a fine line, and we're going to watch, or we're going to go deep here. Like, this is where we're going to go deep. There's 3 sections of scripture that Teresa is going to read. That was the first one. You hear kind of the setting of where it's happening and what she does. This is the conversation, and this is the depth. And this is where we're going to go deeper. And then at the end, we're going to see how it sets things in motion that kind of come to a culmination in chapter 4 next week. So good stuff and good conversation. Anyone else? Any other conversation or thoughts or questions? Anyone?
Yes, so looking at Genesis chapter 38, where Tamar and Judah had something like that, I think it kind of shows how noble a man Boaz is. Because thinking of what happened between Tamar and her father-in-law, Tamar also like put herself out there, and the man just took the bulls by the horn.
Yeah.
You know, but Boaz was very, very conscious of that. I guess he read that story back then and was like, no, this can't happen to me either.
Yeah. No, I think that this is exactly what you're mentioning, Monica, is going to be referenced in a quote in just a minute. And it's the exact reason that I have written this as walking the fine line and knowing yourself and knowing others. And I'll just stop for just a second here, and I'll just say this. You need to know your capabilities, and you need to know who you entrust yourself to. And if you know that you're capable of falling, then you need to be very careful to make this kind of move. I think that Ruth knew who she was. I think she respected Boaz, but did not love him in the way that there's like this passion that like draws her to Boaz. This is just my opinion, but here's what I do think. I think she thought in her heart of hearts, I can trust myself, even my reputation, with this man, because I know what kind of man he is. And I think that's very powerful. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Don't do something stupid and then try to blame it on somebody else who didn't come through for you. Like, you got to be smart, and you got to know yourself. And I'm going to tell you, like, there are things that I know about myself. I would not put myself in certain situations where I know on my worst day, I'm going to fall and have lots of cleanup to do, right? And so you got to be very careful and cautious that you don't do something stupid and say, well, I had intended for it to go a different way. So I think what's happening here with Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, we're about to go deep, but I think she knew who he was. She knew her own heart. And she also knew that the stakes were incredibly high for Naomi. She takes something that is way out of her comfort zone and do it because Naomi has set it in motion. She's walking a very fine line, but she knows herself. She knows what's at stake, and she knows Boaz. I think that's my take. I don't know. Thoughts or questions or comments? Anyone?
Randy, I think you said it. I think that she knew herself, but she also trusted Naomi enough to know the plan that she had set in place.
Yeah.
And since she said, Ruth said, I will do whatever you say, she trusted Naomi. So she knew what she had to do because Naomi had already put it in place, and she trusted Naomi and wanted to please Naomi because, she goes back, she didn't want to leave her side. So she knows that Naomi knows, and she also knows Boaz to be the relative because that's what she told Naomi. Already told her that that's who it was.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Great observations. Great observations, Nancy. I agree. I feel 100% you are right about all those things that you said. I wouldn't really even be able to add much to it. The only thing that I would add to it is, I'll give you a quick little throw out thing here. Have y'all thought about how old Ruth is? She lived with her husband for about 10 years. At that time, and in those days, marrying age probably started somewhere between 13 and 18. She's probably somewhere around 23, 25, probably no older than 29 years old. So she doesn't know things that Naomi does. She doesn't see things that Naomi sees, because isn't that the way it is? As the great rock band Collective Soul once said, when wisdom comes, everything else is already faded, right? I mean, Naomi, everything else is faded for her, but she's still got her wisdom. Ruth is probably a very beautiful young woman, but she has no wisdom on these things. What is she going to do? What does she know about a guy like Boaz and what he's interested in? Naomi said, I know what he's interested in. He's interested in a woman like you, a woman of character and integrity, but also young and probably very beautiful and desirable. But there's some downside, and we're going to go a little deeper. All right, let's keep it moving. But so good, you guys, so good. All right, pick back up here with Miss Teresa, if you don't mind, please reading for us. We're going to pick up in chapter 3, verse 7, and we'll cover some ground here. Okay.
Okay. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant, Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer or kinsman redeemer of our family." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, "No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town.
Thank you, Teresa. All right, in the passage that we just read, is there something that jumps out to you guys? Something that kind of comes to your mind? Anyone?
Yes. Yeah, at verse 9, I don't think it was about anything immoral, but I think it was about Ruth asking Boaz to take her for his wife. With the sleeping at his feet. But the main thing here, I think it's symbolic. It's this picture of throwing a garment over the intended woman. It's similar to Jehovah spreading his garment over Israel.
Amen. Yeah.
Like Ezekiel, I believe, and find it.
Mhm.
But making a covenant, and that was to me the biggest thing that jumped out.
Good, great observations, Leroy, for sure, 100%. And you beat me to the punch, but that is exactly what she's doing. She's asking him to marry her. And that's, I wrote this down. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. She hadn't asked anything up to that point. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So she hadn't said anything other than identified herself and then said, spread your cloak over me because you are a kinsman redeemer, a guardian redeemer. And he says, now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I'm going to do everything for you that you're asking me to do. And so what I wrote there, and we're going to talk about kindness in just a moment. I said, don't miss this. And this is from Sunday morning. You know how I always do the don't miss this. Ruth is proposing marriage. If you didn't catch it, that's what's going on here. And this is one of those cultural things that we might not know, but is happening. When Ruth says, you're my guardian redeemer, spread your cloak over me, he says, this is incredible. You didn't chase after. This kindness that you've shown is deeper than the kindness that you showed by not leaving Naomi in the first place. And I can't believe you haven't chased after a younger or a richer man. But now, don't be afraid. You're putting yourself out there. I'm reciprocating. There's a guy who's closer that is in better position and is going to do it. But if he doesn't, I will. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to make sure everything you're asking for is getting done for you. And that's what's going on. Real quickly, let's talk about this word kindness. You notice in 2:20, the Lord bless him, Naomi said to the daughter-in-law. He is not showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. He's one of our guardian redeemers. And then here, the Lord bless you. This kindness is greater than you showed before. I will tell you guys, I mentioned to y'all on Sunday when we talked about reading the scriptures more faithfully and more often. This is the Bible.com, the YouVersion app. And in there is a video, and I did a little bit of research as well. And in this particular one, you can see here, when you look up Ruth 3, you'll see this video that says Jesus in all of Ruth 3. And it's about a 6-minute video. And this lady comes on and does some explanation, goes deep, and has some great insights that I want to share with you. One of the things she said is this. Ruth and Naomi's plan flirts on the edge of inappropriate. It's a man and a woman alone at night, sleeping together. That means actually sleeping together, not the sexual inference that it's come to mean in our modern times, but they are hidden from view. Ruth even uncovers his feet, and the sexual tension is great, as well as the consequences if Boaz takes this the wrong way, kind of what we've been talking about. But I want you to notice another thing she said. She said, kindness in Ruth doesn't mean just being nice, but being loyal. And even beyond that, it means to be sacrificially loyal. So go back to this. The Lord bless him, Naomi said. He is not showing his sacrificial loyalty to the living and to the dead. He's our close relative. He's one of our guardians and redeemers. The Lord bless you, my daughter. This sacrificial loyalty that you've shown is greater than what you've shown earlier. You haven't run after these other men, but after your kinsman redeemer. So that's pretty powerful. And I wanted to make sure and share that. So real quickly, Ruth proposes, and what is at stake and which way it goes. Let's talk about it very quickly. First of all, know that more than likely Naomi is going to have to sell her family's land to survive. That's probably going to happen, and the inheritance that she's got, she's going to spend it in order to stay off the streets and off of the poverty line. Secondly, Ruth and Naomi are coming as a package deal. They're likely going to be twice the financial responsibility, but it's also likely that only Ruth is going to be the one who contributes, because Naomi's getting up in age and she's not going to be able to bear children. Boaz already has plenty of help in the form of men and women who are basically his employees and not his permanent responsibility. He doesn't have what she brings in, let me bring something to the table here, but that doesn't matter if love's involved, right? Third, Ruth is a Moabitess, not an Israelite. Marrying her is a decision that could bring shame to an Israelite family. Marrying somebody who's not from the nation of Israel. And he is quick to say, I will do it no matter what. And then fourthly, what else is at stake? Ruth is considered barren. In that day, barrenness was always thought to be the woman's fault, which of course now we know that's ridiculous and incredibly wrong, both in general and in this specific case, considering Ruth is the one who is in the line of Jesus, right? So we know that's not true, but Boaz is obtaining a widow and her mother-in-law, and all of the stigmas of being barren are still going to be in place as far as he knows, because he's a man of his times. He doesn't realize that the problem was, in this case, more than likely her first husband, not her. He's marrying a barren Moabitess who is going to be a financial liability to him. So none of this makes any sense except for this is God's leadership in his life. And he says, I will do it. And this is why the kindness that she's referring to is actually better interpreted as sacrificial loyalty. He is going to do what is right for people who need somebody to do something that is right on their behalf. And he's stepping forward and doing it willingly and saying, if this guy won't do it, I promise you, I'll get it done. And Naomi has so much confidence in his word that she says he's going to get it done today. Just watch and see. Powerful stuff. Most of the time, we do not rush towards doing God's will. We go kicking and screaming if we go at all. And people like Boaz are inspirational. He's the man I want to be. I want to be the man who says, there's a need. God's revealed it to me. And if they're not going to fill it, we'll work to fill it. That's what I want to be as a man. And I think what all of us want to be as men and women. Let me just give one more thing real quickly. 5 common signs of infertility in men and women. The truth is that females are about 40% of the blame. Males are 30 to 40%, and a combination of the two are to blame the rest of the time. So the infertility that was always blamed on a woman, most of the time was not her fault or her fault only. It was a combination, or it was on the man just as often, if not more. And so it's an unfair system that the women are dealing with, once again, bringing that up again. But yet in the midst of it, Ruth is thriving and an amazing woman, even though the deck is stacked against her in so many ways. All right. Questions, thoughts, or comments? Anyone? Said a lot.
Why do we, like you said, go toward something screaming, toward doing the right thing or not? Just sin, Satan. They're running and screaming away from doing the right thing.
Well, what I'm saying is most of the time in our lives, We
But
know
what
what
hap-
is right to do and what we should do. And oftentimes we end up going the opposite direction, kind of like Jonah, who knew exactly what God wanted him to do, but he went in the other direction. And sometimes when we do what God said, once again, we're a lot like Jonah, and we're going to have a terrible attitude about it. It's not the way that it should be. It's just the way that it often can be. And so I just want us to be aware that instead you have other people in the Bible with the example of what we're looking to be more like, a man like Boaz, a woman like Ruth, rather than what we often find ourselves to be sometimes, if that makes sense. All right. Anyone else? Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Anyone? All right. Very quickly, let's talk about the last part, the last few verses of chapter 3. Hopefully, these have answered some questions about this chapter for many of you who didn't necessarily have as much clarity on it. So I'll turn it over to Teresa one last time. Anyone? Teresa, go ahead and read that. And then here in just a moment, we'll do the big takeaway from anyone.
Okay. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today."
So we see Boaz coming through in the moment when is needed, and we're going to talk about it and bring it all to a close and all to its fruition next week as we talk about chapter 4. And I hope you guys will be here. Is there anything in chapter 3 that is a little unclear still that you guys wanted to ask, or hopefully it helped to go through it piece by piece and word by word as we went through and share a little bit more? Anybody have anything else about chapter 3 that's still a little unclear? Anyone?
I think it's more clear for me when you talk about Ruth's character and Boaz's character coming in, and not our what you were saying, reading further into it that wasn't there. Their character was there.
Yes, it was. It most certainly was. Anyone else? Any other comments or questions? Anyone? All right. Well, I tell you what, we're going to go to your big takeaway. If any of you guys have a big takeaway, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity. Here's your homework. Read chapter 4 and come ready to share your favorite verse with the Bible study crew, and come ready to share your own big takeaway if you have one. And now is your chance. What is your big takeaway? Did anybody have a big takeaway for this passage of scripture on your own? And keep it tight. Think elevator speech here, but what did you have?
Yeah, I think making a covenant signifies marriage. And it's the figure of God's relationship with Israel.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That passage that I was sharing with you, or pardon me, that video that I was sharing from this passage from chapter 3 that we mentioned earlier, Jesus in Ruth chapter 3, Jesus is the kinsman redeemer for all of us, comes to our aid, brings us from a place of need to a place of, plenty. And for sure, he is not just the covenant with Israel, but also the covenant with the church. Good stuff, for sure. Anyone else? Another big takeaway that you have? Anyone?
I would say that Ruth is very obedient,
Hmm.
and to have a woman with such integrity like Naomi to really teach her, and show her the way. I think that there's like a motherly feeling where you just best for your children, and even though that she was not born from her, but she treated her like she was her daughter, and she wanted the best for her. That if she had to leave that world today, that she would know that she is well taken care of, and she wouldn't have to worry about her being struggling out there, or having to even prostitute herself to survive.
Yeah.
He was making sure that she take care of her to the end.
Absolutely. Very good. And the obedience of Ruth and the submission of Ruth and the humility of Ruth is a beautiful thing. And she is honored for it over and over and over again. It goes back to the passage of scripture that Jesus spoke about. He who humbles himself will be exalted, and he who exalts himself will be humbled, basically. And so Ruth is a perfect example of that. Her obedience, her humility, going on Naomi's direction, even though it wasn't even her mother, but just really powerful stuff. Good stuff. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah.
I go ahead.
I was thinking about her, but Ruth being barren, but how do we really know? Because wasn't the sister-in-law, the other daughter,
Gotta read chapter 4.
his for Naomi's son either?
Yeah.
Read chapter 4.
Well, no, I mean, what you're asking there is right, Donna. I mean, because she didn't have from either side, and more than from either daughter-in-law. And so more than likely it was a genetic problem that was happening for both men.
Yes,
and both the women were the ones that were dealing with the stigma, not the men,
Yeah.
which is again unfair and crazy. And now we're looking at it going, oh, really? That's what we're going to think? But it was the way that it was, and not that it was right. It just, that was the way that it was. So
Yeah, the women got stuck with that.
yes, most certainly. And but God showed up anyway and brought them from that place and moved them away for, yeah. It's a blessing. Eric, go ahead, buddy. You started.
Well, I really respect Boaz because he kind of told Ruth what I tell my wife all the time. You're out of my league. There's somebody out there better than me that you can have if you want. And there's a better Kinsman Redeemer out there. But if he won't take you, I'll be happy to have you in my life. So I really respect that of him to tell her that, and it kind of shows where his heart is coming from. So that's
Donna, you're not supposed to agree with Eric. Donna just goes, yeah. No.
Hey, it's the truth.
Eric, I want to be like you. I was talking bad about Shelly stealing covers. You're talking about how your wife is out of your league. I need to sit at your feet, sir.
No, hey, I told her that the day I met her, and I still tell her that today. So that's the truth.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, very quickly, I'm going to give you my big takeaway, not because it's the right one, but it's because I'll just end with mine. Success requires three things. It requires character, competence, and confidence. It requires all three. If you really think about it, no matter where you are in your life, it requires character, competence, and confidence. And one of those ingredients is missing, real success is not there. Boaz and Ruth had a connection, both respecting each other's kindness / sacrificial loyalty that came from God. They both knew for the other and for them, it was more than just talk. They both had character. But the competence of how to get Boaz to see her in a different way came from Naomi. She said, here's what you're going to do. This is Operation Threshing Floor. You're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. She showed her a path that she didn't know, and she followed it, because it was the right one. And she knew where she was deficit. But then Ruth goes off script and says, cast your garment over me. And that was a lot of boldness and a lot of confidence. She was basically proposing marriage to someone in a culture where that just did not get done. But she knew that God was leading in it, and God brought it about, and it's a beautiful story. And so we see here Ruth's character and her confidence, and where she lacked competence, Naomi came to the rescue. So it's good stuff. All right. Well, guys, thank you all so much for your time, for your attention. I apologize. We run a few minutes over, but God bless you guys. Thank you all for being on and being with us. Next week, chapter 4, last chapter, last lesson. Be here, be a part, and make sure that you're doing your reading, and come with a big takeaway, come with a favorite passage, and we'll dive a little deep in Ruth. Some good stuff to cover next week. So God bless you guys. Y'all have a good rest of the week. And thank y'all for being here. Y'all take care.
Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Right.